Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm starting my part 2 video of Martin Baynard's Cottage, my Nancy Roberts book, South Carolina Ghosts from the Coast of the Mountains. Well, let's read on to where I left off last time. Why, I suppose we are both blessed. Why must you look so serious, my dear Martin? It is my nature. I'm supposed to believe that life for most people is something of a prison, and death reaches them unfreed and still unblessed. Martin, you have quite a morbid streak at times. They must escape their prison, as you call it. At that moment, the music stopped, and Victoria's brother Edmund and his partner Bestie, a sweet-faced blonde who was on Hilton Head for the summer, escaping from what the Charlestons call the stickly season, turned to speak to them. Is your sister always so flushed after one dance, or is it the excitement? Asked Betsy. The music had begun once again, and they were a few steps away. No, she doesn't seem like herself, said Edmund, watching her from a distance. But everyone, even Martin, who noticed her high color and even greater vivacy than usual, thought it was excitement over the waiting to be. The following morning, he went out to the stable to be certain his carriage had been properly polished and decorated. Even in the shadows, it gleamed and reflected his tall, straight figure. Martin was proud of his brougham built by Hooper, for it was a most sought-after vehicle. American carriage builders had borrowed the design from England, where Lord Brougham had introduced it. Martin had left instructions that the elegant, glossy black carriage be decorated with white satin rosettes and ribbons. This morning, his coachman stood waiting nearby, impressive in his dark blue coat with silver braid, the Baynard livery. Martin declined the coachman's gesture to assist him, and they were on their way down the sandy, windy road that led to the Stony plantation. As the white ribbons fluttered in the summer breeze, Martin thought of the future, the months and years of happiness that lay ahead. There would be children and family holidays to celebrate the warm, tender companionship of later years, built on memories. All of this passed through his mind, not in detail, but with the vision the heart holds fast and gives up only with the deepest anguish. It was a clear, bright morning, and pine needles glistened in the summer sunlight. He was aware of the songs of birds, of the beauty all around him. It was one of those rare occasions when he felt a part of it all and joyously alive. After a while, these pleasant pictures gave way to a light-heartedness that Martin seldom felt, for there was a certain melancholy spirit that had always existed in the core of his being. On either side of the carriage, the marsh grass passed as if he rode through the midst of a silken sea. His happy trance was broken by the sudden awareness of a small black fleck on the horizon, which began to move resolutely toward him. In a few minutes it was apparent that it was the figure of a horseman. Martin was puzzled. The rider was obviously riding at breakneck speed to become visible so soon. Who could it be? No ordinary traveler would proceed at such a pace. In fact, it was no ordinary rider, but one of the best horsemen he had ever known, his future brother-in-law, Edmund. Victoria's brother reined in the animal, and with a swirl of sand as the big bay's hoofs wheeled about in the sand, he was beside the carriage. There was no smile on his face or in his gray eyes, only extreme distress. Martin, I have bad news for you. Victoria was extremely ill all night. A physician had been sent for, and it's at this moment on the way to her. Martin was so stunned he could scarcely believe he had heard Edmund rightly. Edmund, for God's sakes, what is wrong with her? I don't know, but there are symptoms of the country fever. Martin's face whitened, his jaw tensed, and his blue eyes stared straight ahead as if he could not bear to look at Edmund. Tethering his horse to the brougham, Edmund got into the carriage with the silent Martin. Indeed, he scarcely spoke during the drive to the house. Edmund tried to relieve Martin's anxiety, saying that even now the doctor was probably there and would hasten Victoria's recovery. "I pray to God he will," was Martin's tense response. When they reached the Stony plantation, a canopied, dusty phaeton was coming down the avenue of oaks toward them. As they approached the house, a gray-haired, ruddy-faced man leaned out of it. "She has an extremely high fever, gentlemen." "May I see her, doctor?" asked Martin. "I am sorry, my good fellow, you may not." "But, sir—" "Martin, she is delirious." The answer is no. Baynard reluctantly quiescent. The doctor, after promising that he would return to see Victoria that evening, lightly swatted the rear of his large black and white pony and drove on. Victoria's father stood waiting for them on the plaza, worried as he was. He was the picture of composure in every inch of aristocrat. There was a striking white hair, olive skin, generous, finely chiseled mouth, and expressive topaz eyes that, despite his calm, clearly showed deep anxiety. Mrs. Stoney came out of the depths of the house and joined her husband just as Edmund and Martin hurried up the Pazia steps. "Good morning, Martin. We are distressed at having such bad news for you. Papa, why don't you go in and rest a while?" "How is she now, Mrs. Stoney?" asked Martin. "About the same, Martin. She had been delirious most of the night." Mr. Stoney excused himself to rest for an hour, and his wife beckoned to Edmund and Martin to follow her into the parlor. They discussed guests to be notified at nearby plantations, and Martin noticed several notes on the table in Elizabeth Stoney's handwriting, writing that was strong and bold for a woman. Even at such a moment, he noticed that. "I bet you when Victoria picked up the doll graveyard, something must have lingered on to her because they didn't like her touching it. And the fact that the doctor said he cannot go in there to see her, I mean, like, come on. I know she's delirious, of course, but I won't talk her ears off. I just want to see her real quick and then go out." But I suppose back in them days, them doctors were really strict on stuff like that. I'm sorry that this had to happen to her, though. The notes were to be sent with others that he and Edmund had suggested, and one of the servants was standing at the door now to see that they were dispatched. They explained that Victoria was ill and the wedding could not take place at this time. Martin could scarcely believe it. He looked through the door of the parlor at the stairway. How often had he visualized his bride descending it in her going-away clothes. There wouldn't be no wedding voyage tomorrow from Savannah to England. Martin arose and stepped out in the semi-darkness of the large hall, finding a seat on the velvet-covered Chippendale sofa. The fever would pass, he thought. Victoria would soon be as healthy as ever. Suddenly, he was aware that he was not alone. Someone was just a few feet away. "Who is there?" He called out, but no one answered. A figure appeared almost at his elbow, and he reached out roughly. "Oh, Mr. Martin, don't hurt me." "Bina, it's you. I'm not going to hurt you. Why didn't you answer me?" "She going, Mr. Martin, she going. I knew when I heard, dem pack. There was a note of mystery and dark foreboding in the soft voice. He understood her meaning and became angry, which only frightened Bina more. "Don't you tell Miss Victoria that, Bina." "Do you hear me?" She nodded miserably. "Is she awake?" Bina tried to reply, but began crying and shaking her head. He took that to mean Victoria was still delirious. But releasing Bina, he sank back on the sofa, emotionally spent. He must have slept there until late afternoon. He got up and went upstairs, seating himself in a chair in the hallway, hoping that Mrs. Stoney or Bina would come out of Victoria's room and tell him something about her condition. He had not sat there long before Mrs. Stoney rushed out of the room, sobbing. He did not wait for permission to enter. There lay Victoria, her eyes closed, and upon her face a waxy pallor. He pulled her to him, but she did not open her eyes. That's so sad. I was hoping that she would get over it, that condition. Hugging her against his breast, he was suddenly struck by the stillness of the form in his arms. He gazed at his beloved closely. Victoria was dead. Martin was startled to hear someone gasp and run from the room. Bina had been standing just behind him, and he found her out in the hall. "De God woke, Mr. Martin. De God woke," the girl said in Gula. "No, Beanie, it is not God's work. It is the work of the devil." Martin left the stony home, his eyes wild and his expression tragic. Edmund tried to stop him at his carriage and calm him, but all Baynard would say was, "The tempest strikes," and off he rode. The carriage carrying down the road. Inside the coach, Martin was filled with rage. He ripped off whatever ribbons his angry fingers could reach and shouted imprecations at God. Bitter accusations punctured by the sound of tearing satin, and all the while he cried great gasping sobs. The funeral was held the day after Victoria's death. Martin arrived at the Stony plantation just before the carriages were to set out, and the gleaming black coach, now arrayed with black satin rosettes and streamers, took its place behind that of the family. The Stoneys were shocked at the appearance of his grief-ravaged face. Yielding to Martin's impassioned pleas, the Stoneys had agreed to Victoria's body being interred in the Baynard mausoleum. The door gaped open, and now they were gathered around it. Martin did not leave his coach. Mrs. Stoney, in a high-necked black silk dress, with her hair drawn back severely, looked years older. At her right stood Edmund, pale and hollow-eyed. Behind them were some of the family slaves. Bina stood a little apart from the rest, with her face expressionless and her brown eyes enigmatic. Perhaps she was pondering de God woke, or wondering why Miss Lisa Beth urged her to worship a God who would allow her young mistress to be taken on the eve of her wedding. With her people at night around the firesides, there was talk of powerful charms that could cure sickness, and of the return of the spirits of the departed. Bina may have thought of this, for she gave a slight, almost imperceptible shiver as she stared into the darkness of the mausoleum. One tightly closed hand grasped a small piece of broken pottery. Before she left, she would find an opportunity to drop it beside the mausoleum. Inside his coach, Martin sat alone. He could not believe his Victoria would actually be placed in one of the cold stone crypts. His memories of her were so strong that even at this moment he could feel her presence, as if she were right at his side. He watched Mrs. Stoney, for she held a white rose, which in a monument she would place on Victoria's casket. Then in the midst of the scripture reading there came an explosive crash of thunder. "The tempest strikes," thought Martin. The guests were stunned to see the Baynard coach, darkly magnificent in its funeral decor, dart from its place in line and hurtle out of the cemetery. What possessed Martin to behave so? Edmund asked his father on the way home. What do you say his words were when he left the house yesterday after Victoria's death? Something about a tempest striking him. Oh, I know. You know what, said Edmund, more the huntsman than the scholar. Arnold's poem, A Summer Night, is what I think he meant. A man escapes the prison of life, but before any blessing befalls him, the tempest strikes him, and between the lightning burst it seemed only as a shivering wreck. A driving wreck. Good Lord! That's what he looked like today, wasn't it? A wreck. Mr. Stoney stared off in the direction the coach had gone and shook his head. The clouds were dark and threatening, and it seemed to be gathering up its fury. In the late afternoon, a torrential rain fell, accompanied by a wild burst of thunder and lightning. The drops of water were only a light patter on the roof when an old black man appeared at the back door of the Stoney home, asking to speak to Mr. Stoney. He had served the household for years, but had become so crippled that he moved close to the beach where he lived, fishing and crabbing. "Mr. Stoney, I see it." The man was trembling with excitement. "I see Martin Baynard's carriage with those 4 black horses just galloping down the beach right in the middle of that storm, and lightning was playing all around that coach." Not was the fisherman the only one, for many saw the black coach being driven at breakneck speed along the beach, black satin streamers still dangling from it. A week after the funeral, a servant arrived at the Stoneys astride Martin's fastest horse, a 2-year-old thoroughbred named Lafayette. Baynard had sent him with a message that he, like Victoria, had the dreaded fever and would die, with her name on my lips. And die Martin Baynard did. A week to the day after Victoria's funeral, he was interred in the Baynard mausoleum, and at his request no service was held. But strangely enough, the appearances of the carriage continued on the very night Martin was taken to the cemetery. There were reports of the rhythmic thunder of horses' hoofs and the clatter of a coach rusted past. This happened through the years, and some, born with a call, and others, unaware of any special powers, have seen the carriage hurtling down the island roads in the moonlight, or racing beside the foaming surf. There were always allusions to the black satin ribbon streaming in the wind. Even today, there are some who claim to have seen a vehicle coming toward them on stormy nights, and between the flashes of lightning have been sure it was an old-fashioned coach passing them. Over a century has gone by, but the story of the phantom coach lingers on at Hilton Head Island. If the pounding hoof beats should be heard late at night by a guest in one of the fine hotels, Martin Baynard's gleaming coach may be dashing by. There are islanders who know the sounds full well and drawn their curtains aside ever so slightly to watch this grieved and angry spirit passing in the night. And when will Martin Baynard cease to drive his airy funeral carriage? The older Gala said, "Not till Gabriel blow e horn." That is one sad story. 2 people were about to get married, and all of a sudden the future bride-to-be gets stricken with a sickness and dies, and then the other guy just goes into madness and dies as well. But will he ever stop haunting the beach roads on Hilton Head Island? Probably never, but you never know if he sees his beloved Victoria again. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more book reading content like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Quarter channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and I say that's a wrap. Have a nice day.